In this video, I'm going to discuss a bunch of specifics about the global population crisis. The topics of this video will be historical population growth, modern population growth, birth rates, immigration, and Western culture. I'll then explain what society can do to prevent a future population collapse. If you're watching the full episode on the podcast channel, all sections will be timestamped in the description. If you're watching on the Clips channel, make sure to watch all episodes to get the best understanding of this topic. I hope you enjoy, and if you have any criticisms, leave them in the description below. Alright, now on to today's podcast. In the year 200 AD, the total population of the world was 190 million. At this time in history, the Roman Empire was in the middle of the construction of its road systems, the most complex road systems in the world had ever seen up until that point. In 600 AD, the total population of the world was 200 million. At this time in history, simple improvements were made, such as the creation of toilet paper, matches, and sewing machines. In 1100 AD, the total population of the world was 320 million. Between 600 and 1100, toothbrushes, bombs, banknotes, also known as currencies, porcelain, iron horseshoes, algebra, quadratic equations, blueprints for grindstones, printed books, gunpowder, chess, Latin, firearms in the form of the fire lance, fireworks, and pens were invented. In 1500 AD, the total population of the world was 450 million. Between 1100 and 1500, the first model of a rocket, clocks, buttons, hand cannons, cotton gins, landmines, glasses, multi-stage rockets, cannons, painting canvases, naval mines, springs, rifles, early models of drills, and the printing press were invented. In 1650, the total population of the world was 500 million. Between 1500 and 1650, printed clothing, floating docks, maps, backing staff, stocking frame, and the revolver were invented. In 1700, the total population of the world was 600 million. Between 1650 and 1700, newspapers, the telescope, microscopes, rulers, calculators, vacuum pumps, friction machines, pressure cookers, pistons, and steam-powered water pumps were invented. In 1760, the total population of the world was 770 million. Between 1700 and 1760, pianos, thermometers, cotton spring machines, the Franklin stove, lightning rods, the first version of refrigerators, the first version of steam-powered cars were invented. In 1804, the total population of the world was 1 billion. Between 1760 and 1804, the weighing scale, boring machines, air compressors, locks, steamboats, hot air balloons, parachutes, threshing machines, power looms, telegraphs, plywood, paper machines, the first version of the light bulb were also invented. In 1927, the total population of the world was 2 billion. Between 1804 and 1927, steam-powered trains, combustion engines, canned food, the wristwatch, the stethoscope, bicycles, photographs, the first model of the computer, lighters, the bolt-action rifle, gas stoves, reaping machines, lawnmowers, electric motors, the first version of the dollar panel, rubber, fertilizer, cement, nitroglycerin, repeating rifles, wind turbines, flushing toilets, color photography, steel, plastic, phonograph, rechargeable batteries, carbon fiber, dynamite, barbed wire, the electric tram, the telephone, rebreathers, welding, gas-powered cars, tires, cardboard, zippers, electric ovens, diesel engines, x-rays, vacuum cleaners, airplanes, televisions, tanks, silicon, and penicillin were invented. In 1961, the total population of the world was 3 billion. Between 1927 and 1961, the FM radio, wheelchair, nuclear energy, defibrillators, microwaves, ballistic missiles, non-infection vaccines, atomic bombs, transistors, hydrogen bombs, video games, hovercrafts, hard disk drives, artificial intelligence, personal computers, satellites, and lasers were invented. In 1975, the total population of the world was 4 billion. Between 1961 and 1975, high-speed rail, space stations, floppy disks, gaming consoles, fiber optic communication, touchscreen computers, and lithium batteries were invented. In 1988, the total population of the world was 5 billion. Between 1975 and 1988, self-driving cars, handheld gaming consoles, public dial-up, reusable spacecraft, laptops, and cell phones were invented. In 1998, the total population of the world was 6 billion. Between 1988 and 1998, the internet, search engines, SIM cards, smartphones, Bluetooth, DVDs, dating sites, online food delivery, mobile internet, social media, and MP3 players were invented. In 2010, the total population of the world was 7 billion. Between 1998 and 2010, digital video recorders, Blu-ray, Xbox, podcasts, YouTube, Netflix, banking apps, SoundCloud, Kindle, blockchain, and solar sails were invented. In 2022, the total population of the world was 8 billion. Between 2010 and 2022, Twitch TV, HIV treatment, and COVID-19 vaccines were invented. Overall, it took 200 years to go from 190 million to 2 million, or 200 million, 500 years from 200 to 300, 400 years from 300 to 400, 150 years from 400 to 500, 50 years from 500 to 600, 60 years from 600 to 700, 44 years from 700 to 1 billion, 23 years from 1 billion to 2 billion, 34 years from 2 billion to 3 billion, 14 years from 3 to 4 billion, 13 years from 4 to 5 billion, 10 years from 5 to 6 billion, 12 years from 6 to 7 billion, and another 12 years from 7 to 8 billion. So with the population growth at an all-time high, why are people sounding the alarm about a future population collapse? The next thing to look at is the top 10 countries by population to understand their individual growth. India grew from 346 million in 1950 to 435 million in 1960, 545 million in 1970, 687 million in 1980, 864 million in 1990, 1.05 billion in 2000, 1.24 billion in 2010, 1.4 billion in 2020, and 1.43 billion today. That means India grew by 25.72% in 1960, 25.29% in 1970, 26.06 in 1980, 25.76 in 1990, 21.53% in 2000, 18.1% in 2010, 12.9% in 2020, and 2.14% today. China's population went from 554, 654, 823, 983, 1.15, 1.26, 1.35, 1.426 to 1.422 billion today. That's a population growth of 20.22, 25.84, 19.44, 16.99, 9.57, 7.14, 5.63, and negative 0.28% today. The United States population went from 154, 180, 207, 229, 253, 281, 311, 339, and 343 million today. That's a growth of 16.88, 15, 10.63, 10.48, 11.07, 10.68, 9, and 1.18% today. Indonesia's population went from 68.7, 88.2, 115, 148, 183, 216, 246, 274, and 218 million today. That's a growth of 28.38, 30.39, 28.7, 23.65, 18.03, 13.89, 11.38, and 2.55% today. Pakistan's population went from 35.8, 45.7, 60.1, 82.2, 116, 154, 199, 235 to 247 million today. That's a growth of 27.65, 31.51, 36.77, 41.12, 32.76, 29.22, 18.09, and 5.11% today. Nigeria's population went from 37.2, 45, 55.8, 73.7, 97.1, 126, 166, 213, and 227 million today. That's a population growth of 20.97, 24, 32.08, 31.75, 29.76, 31.75, 28.31, and 6.57% today. Brazil's population went from 53.4, 72.3, 95.3, 121, 149, 174, 193, 208, and 211 million today. That's a growth of 35.39, 31.81, 26.97, 23.14, 16.78, 10.92, 7.77, and 1.44% today. Bangladesh's population went from 41.2, 51.8, 69, 88, 111, 134, 152, 166, 171 million today. That's a growth of 25.73, 33.2, 27.54, 26.14, 20.72, 13.43, 9.21, and 3.01% today. Russia's population went from 103, 119, 130, 138, 148, 146, 143, 146, to 145 million today. That's a growth of 15.53, 9.24, 6.15, 7.25, negative 1.35, negative 2.05, 2.1, and negative 0.68 today. Finally, Ethiopia's population went from 17.6, 21.3, 28.7, 34.4, 47.6, 67.4, 90.5, 118, to 128 million today. That's a growth of 21.02, 30.52, 23.74, 38.37, 41.6, 34.27, 30.39, and 8.47% today. The total population of the top 10 countries of the world goes from 1.4, 1.71, 2.12, 2.58, 3.11, 3.6, 4.09, 4.52, to 4.6 billion today. That's a growth of 22.23, 24.28, 21.44, 20.68, 15.7, 13.38, 10.62, and 1.77% today. That also means the top 10 countries combined make up 56.26, 56.89, 57.67, 58.2, 58.73, 58.77, 58.6, 57.72, and 57.28% of the total world population today. There's also another interesting way to look at this as well. You can take the total population and divide it amongst all the countries that make up the total. This leaves us with a top 10 population growth from 140, 171, 212, 258, 311, 360, 409, 452, to 460 million today. The global population divided between each country would go from 12.3, 14.9, 18.3, 22, 26.4, 30.5, 34.7, 39, to 40 million today. But this is just the population growth of the top 10 countries today. and doesn't take into consideration the countries that used to be part of the top 10. These countries consist of Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Mexico. Japan's population went from 84.3, 94.4, 105, 117, 123, 126, 128, 125 to 123 million today. That's a growth of 11.98, 11.23, 11.43, 5.13, 2.44, 1.59, negative 2.34, and negative 1.6% today. Germany's population went from 70.9, 73, 78.2, 77.7, 79.3, 81.5, 81.3, 83.3, and 83.2 million today. That's a population growth of 2.96, 7.12, negative 0.64, 2.06, 2.77, negative 0.25, 2.46, and negative 0.12% today. The United Kingdom's population went from 50, 52.5, 55.6, 56.3, 57.2, 58.8, 62.7, 67, and 67.7 million today. That's a growth of 5, 5.9, 1.26, 1.6, 2.8, 6.63, 6.86, and 1.04% today. Italy's population went from 46.3, 49.5, 55.3, 56.3, 56.7, 56.9, 59.8, 59.5 to 58.8 million today. That's a growth of 6.91, 7.68, 5.63, 0.71, 0.35, 5.1, negative 0.5, and negative 1.18% today. Mexico's population went from 27.6, 36.2, 50.2, 67.7, 81.7, 97.8, 112, 125, and 128 million today. That's a growth of 31.16, 38.67, 34.86, 20.68, 19.71, 14.52, 11.61, and 2.4% today. With these countries added to the historic data, the new top 10 population goes from 1.52, 1.82, 2.22, 2.67, 3.19, 3.66, 4.12, 4.53, and 4.6 billion today. That's a growth of 19.7, 22.38, 19.9, 19.59, 14.81, 12.57, 9.79, and 1.61% today. That also means that this new top 10 list makes up 61.07, 60.47, 60.37, 60.16, 60.15, 59.72, 59.14, 57.81, and 57.28% of the global population today. Now let's compare the growth of the countries before and after they were all part of the top 10 list. The before growth would be 141, 178, 235, 311, 81.7, 97.8, and 112 million in 2010. That's a growth of 26.02, 31.56, 32.54, negative 73.78, 19.71, and 14.52%. The aftergrowth would go from 49.5, 108, 112, 193, 197, 203, 334, to 332 million today. That's a growth of 120, 3.4, 71.58, 2.07, 3.35, 64.28, and negative 0.63%. But with the fluctuation of the amount of countries in both of these tables, it's best to average them out to get the best look into how well they actually grow. With these new averages, the before growth went from 35.4, 44.6, 58.7, 77.9, 81.7, 97.8 to 112 million in 2010. That's a new growth of 26.02, 31.56, 32.54, 4.88, 19.71, and 14.52%. The aftergrowth went from 49.5, 54.4, 56.3, 64.4, 65.7, 67.9, 83.7 to 83.1 million today. That's a growth of 10, 3.4, 14.39, 2.07, 3.35, 23.21, and negative 0.63%. With this data, we can see a pattern. Before becoming part of the top 10 list, countries on average grow the fastest. Countries in the top 10 list grow an average growth, but not fast enough to maintain their share of global population. And the countries that are removed from the top 10 list have a slow to negative population growth. But why is this? Population growth is the result of two things. The first is fertility rates, and the second is migration. In part 4, I'll get into migration, but for now let's talk about fertility rates. I'll be using the same countries as part 1 to get the best understanding of the situation. India's birth rate from 1960 to today is 5.9, 5.6, 4.8, 4, 3.4, 2.6, 2.1, and 2 births per woman. China's is 4.7, 4.8, 3.7, 3.3, 2.7, 2.6, 2.3, and 2.3. The United States is 3.7, 2.5, 1.8, 2.1, 2.1, 1.9, 1.6, and 1.7. Indonesia's is 5.5, 5.4, 4.5, 3.1, 2.5, 2.5, 2.2, and 2.2. Pakistan's is 6.8, 6.8, 6.7, 6.4, 5.3, 4.3, 3.6, and 3.4. Nigeria's is 6.4, 6.5, 6.8, 6.5, 6.1, 6, 5.3, and 5.1. Brazil is 6.1, 5, 4, 2.9, 2.3, 1.8, 1.6, and 1.6. Bangladesh is 6.8, 6.9, 6.3, 4.5, 3.2, 2.3, 2, and 1.9. Russia is 2.5, 2, 1.9, 1.9, 1.2, 1.6, 1.5, and 1.4. Ethiopia is 6.9, 7, 7.3, 7.2, 6.6, 5.2, 4.2, and 4.1. The average birth rate would come out to be 5.5, 5.3, 4.8, 4.2, 3.5, 3.1, 2.6, and 2.6. But again, this isn't very accurate because it does not include the countries that were historically in the top 10 most populated countries. Japan would be 2, 2.1, 1.8, 1.5, 1.4, 1.4, 1.3, and 1.3. Germany is 2.4, 2, 1.4, 1.4, 1.4, 1.4, 1.5, and 1.5. The United Kingdom is 2.7, 2.4, 1.9, 1.8, 1.6, 1.9, 1.6, and 1.6. Italy is 2.4, 2.4, 1.6, 1.3, 1.3, 1.5, 1.2, and 1.2. Mexico is 6.8, 6.6, 4.8, 3.5, 2.7, 2.3, 1.9, and 1.8. With these new countries, 3 important averages can be made. The birth rate before joining the top 10 list, the birth rate while in the top 10 list, and the birth rate after leaving the top 10 list. The before birth rate would be 6.7, 6.6, 5.8, 5, 2.7, and 2.3. The top 10 average would be 3.8, 3.9, 3.7, 3.1, 3, 2.7, 2.4, and 2.3. The after would be 2.4, 1.8, 1.6, 1.4, 1.6, 1.4, and 1.4. With this information, we can see that countries have a higher birth rate before joining the top 10 and end up having a lower birth rate after leaving the top 10.